All right, get ready for a deep dive into some serious brain science. We've got a listener request to break down this case report, and, well, let's just say the connection it's highlighting is pretty wild.
Definitely intriguing stuff.
So the report's from the Journal of Veterinary Internal Medicine, right?
Yes, and it involves two dogs with some pretty unique neurological findings.
And it all seems to start with something called anisocoria, which I'm guessing most of our listeners are familiar with, but for those who need a refresher.
Sure, anisocoria just means the pupils of the eyes are different sizes. One might be dilated or constricted more than the other.
Right, and like you said, it can be caused by a bunch of different things. So What makes these two cases so special?
Well, both dogs, a 10-year-old crossbreed and an 8-year-old greyhound, suddenly started having all these signs of what we call cerebellar dysfunction.
So problems with coordination, balance, maybe a head tilt, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But here's where things get really interesting. Both dogs also had something called ipsilateral mydriasis.
Ipsilateral mydriasis. Okay, break that down for me.
So ipsilateral means on the same side, and mydriasis means pupil dilation. So basically, the pupil on the same side of the body as the cerebellar problem was dilated, bigger than the other one.
Oh, wow. So the side where their coordination was off, the pupil in that eye was larger? That's not what you typically think of when you hear cerebellum.
You got it. Usually when we see anisocoria, we start thinking about problems in the eye itself, or maybe issues with those nerve pathways that control pupil size. You know, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, those are what usually make the pupils constrict or dilate.
Yeah, those are like the gas and brake pedals for your pupils.
Exactly. But the cerebellum, not usually part of that picture.
Okay, so right off the bat, these cases are already hinting that there might be a connection between the cerebellum and pupil control that, well, maybe we don't fully understand.
Right, and when they did MRI scans of both dogs, it really started to paint a clearer picture.
What did the MRIs show?
Both dogs had what we call an ischemic infarct in their cerebellum, specifically in a region called the interposital nucleus.
Infarct, so like a stroke, right?
Yeah, basically a blood clot blocked off the blood flow to that part of the brain, damaging the tissue.
Hold on, so let me get this straight. A stroke in the cerebellum is causing these dogs to have coordination problems and this weird pupil dilation on the same side.
Exactly. It seems like there has to be some connection, right?
Right. But how? Like, what's the link?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, the crux of the matter. Turns out the researchers actually dug up some older studies done on cats this time.
And I bet these cat studies involved messing with the interposital nucleus somehow.
Yep, they intentionally removed it, ablated it, as we say in the biz.
And what happened to the cat's pupils?
They developed ipsilateral mydriasis, the same pupil dilation, on the same side where they removed the interposital nucleus. So now we're seeing a pattern here.
Okay, whoa. Two dogs with strokes in this super specific brain region, caps having the same region intentionally removed, and all of them end up with this same unusual pupil dilation. It's like we've stumbled onto this whole new piece of the neurological puzzle.
We have, and it all points to something going on between the interposital nucleus and how our pupils react, but the big question is, why? We still don't know the exact mechanism.
So this is blowing my mind a little bit. We always learned about the cerebellum being all about balance and coordination, but not pupil size. It's almost like these cases are rewriting the textbooks, aren't they?
Kind of. And the paper actually includes these figures, MRI images of the two dogs, and you can literally see those areas of damage right in the interposital nucleus. It's amazing how these tiny little spots can have such big effects.
It makes you wonder what other connections in the brain we might be missing.
Totally. And it just goes to show that sometimes a symptom that seems totally unrelated can actually be a clue to something much bigger going on. It really makes you think differently about anisocoria, you know?
Yeah, like it might not be as simple as just an eye problem. It could be a sign of something more serious going on in the brain.
Exactly. And this really highlights how important a good neurological exam is. Even if the initial symptom seems totally eye-related, you got to look at the big picture.
Absolutely. So both dogs in the study, they actually recovered pretty well, right? Just with supportive care.
They did. It mostly focused on managing those symptoms, making the dogs comfortable while their bodies did their thing and healed. Things like anti-nausea meds, helping them eat and move around, and physical therapy to get that coordination back.
So really addressing both the neurological and physical needs.
Yep. And both dogs, they showed some pretty significant improvement. Their neurological symptoms gradually got better. And the anisocoria, it was completely gone within a couple of weeks.
Wow, that's encouraging. especially knowing that one of the dogs, the greyhound, he lived for another 3 years after this whole thing.
Yeah, it really shows that even with a stroke in such a delicate part of the brain, recovery is definitely possible.
And it makes you wonder, like, what could this research mean for human medicine? We have an interposital nucleus too, right?
We do. So there's definitely potential here. We're just starting to understand this connection between the interposital nucleus and pupil control, but who knows? Maybe this research in dogs could lead to breakthroughs in human neurology down the line.
It's crazy to think about, we always talk about how studying animals can teach us so much about ourselves. And this is a perfect example.
For sure. It reminds us that those tiny details, like a change in pupil size, they can be incredibly important. They might be the key to unlocking a whole bunch of new knowledge.
Totally. It's all about paying attention, being observant, and if something seems off with your pet, don't hesitate to get them checked out by a vet. Early intervention can make a huge difference.
Couldn't agree more. In this case report, it really shows that even when a symptom seems pretty straightforward, like a simple eye problem, it could actually be connected to something way more complex going on neurologically.
I'm glad we got to really dig into this research. It's been fascinating and honestly kind of mind-blowing.
It just goes to show how two unusual cases can spark all sorts of new questions and completely change the way we understand how the brain works.
There's always something new to learn, especially when it comes to the brain. It's incredible how complex and adaptable it is.
It is. And I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that we got to be open to challenging what we think we know.
Always be questioning, always be learning. Science is constantly evolving, and every new discovery has the power to change our perspective and open up new possibilities.
Yeah, and even if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all this brain stuff, just remember, every little bit of understanding, it's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Whether you're a vet, a dog owner, or just someone who loves learning about science, hopefully this deep dive has given you a new appreciation for the amazing world inside our heads.
And for me, one of the coolest parts is seeing how these discoveries in animals can potentially lead to breakthroughs that help both pets and people. It's a win-win.
It really is. And it's all thanks to those curious minds who keep asking questions, keep pushing the boundaries of what we know. So to all of you out there, keep those minds inspired.
Keep those hearts light and tails wagging.
From Vet NeuroJar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light and tails wagging. It really makes you realize how much we don't know yet.
It does. It's like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding the brain.
And this research it's a great example of that. We see this one symptom, the anisocoria, and we might think, oh, it's just an eye problem.
But then, bam, turns out there's this whole other layer, this neurological component that we wouldn't have even considered before.
It's like one of those optical illusions where you see one thing at first glance and then suddenly you realize there's a whole other image hidden there.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how many other connections, other hidden pathways are just waiting to be discovered in the brain.
Well, speaking of connections, I mean, that's really what this whole deep dive has been about, right? Understanding that the brain isn't just a bunch of separate parts, but this incredibly intricate network where everything is connected and influencing everything else.
It is. And this research it really drives home that point. It shows that even a small disruption in one area, like that tiny little infarct in the interposital nucleus, can have these ripple effects throughout the entire system.
And it's a reminder that we, as vets, as scientists, as anyone who's interested in how the brain works, we need to keep an open mind. We need to be willing to challenge what we think we know and consider all the possibilities, even the ones that seem a little out there at first.
Absolutely. And this case report, it's a great reminder of that, because who would have thought that a dilated pupil could be a sign of a cerebellar stroke? It just goes to show that we're always learning and there's always more to discover.
That's what makes studying the brain so exciting, right? It's this constant journey of exploration and discovery. And like you said earlier, even if we don't have all the answers right now, every little step toward understanding is a step in the right direction.
Exactly. And for me, one of the most rewarding parts of this research is seeing how those discoveries in animals can potentially lead to breakthroughs that help both pets and people. It's this beautiful cycle of knowledge and collaboration that ultimately benefits everyone.
It really is. And it all starts with those curious minds out there who keep asking questions, keep pushing the boundaries of what we know. So to all of you listening, keep those minds inspired, keep exploring, keep learning, because the world of science is full of amazing things just waiting to be discovered.
Keep those hearts light and those tails wagging.
From Vet NeuroJar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.